Okay, so this is lecture 34, right? This is lecture 34, if I think so. Okay, so the thing is, like in the last few lectures, you have seen an overview of very much like a different equalization schemes, right? You do on transmitter side, you do on the receiver side. So what I will do is I will start with the list down all the equalization schemes which you have seen at a very top level, and then we'll go in each of these in detail, like detail at the design architecture level and even at the circuit level. Okay, so what you have seen is equalization in serial links. And you see on the transmitter side, right? And this transmitter side equalization which you are seeing is something called as FIR equalization. Okay, and this FIR equalization is also called as an feed forward equalization. And this will become clear when we basically go in detail of this feed forward equalization. And this actually can be implemented in two different ways. One is a current mode logic based equalizer. I think this is what you have seen at a some overview you have it, and the other one is voltage mode equalization. We will see what are the benefits of that. Okay. Then there also exists another kind of equalization which is called as a pulse width modulation based equalization, which can be implemented in both current mode and voltage mode. So this is mostly the equalization which you use on the transmitter side. Then you have on the receiver side, the same feed forward equalization can be implemented, and there are problems in implementing which we will see when we come to it. The other one is basically linear equalization, and this linear equalization can be active and passive both. And I think you have seen the active part of this linear equalization in some form of CTLE. Okay, but there also exists a passive equalization which is used quite often just to boost up the loss compensation. Then there is something called as a DFE, which is decision feedback equalizer, and this was the topic where we just in the last lecture we just reviewed it very briefly. And this is actually a non-linear equalizer as mentioned. And then there also exists some kind of IIR equalization on the receiver side, and that IIR equalization is nowadays used a lot because you are compensating loss close to 35 dB at Nyquist frequency. So we will see that also. So these are the different kinds of equalization schemes which we have, which I have just enlisted here, and we will go into detail of each of these with implementation. Okay, so let's begin with on the transmitter side. So what you have seen on the transmitter side is that given a channel, you basically have some kind of buffer or output driver, some kind of buffer which I will call as an output driver, because this is outputting the digital bit stream onto the channel. So the name is output driver. Okay. Now, given the channel response at CH, what you do is you basically try to equalize on the transmitter side. I think I can just use the notation which we were using before, which is also H. So H equalizer of N, or let me just write it as H equalizer of S is equals to ideally 1H channel of S, right? So this is basically what, when we want to do equalization, we want to implement this H equalizer transfer function on the transmit data. Now the way it is being done is that you have the transmit bits coming, and then they go through a FIR filter, and which is basically, then you can say some pulse shaping happens, and that is output to the channel. Now in this particular case, you see that if I call this basically if I call the input bit stream as D of n, right? Then after the FIR, the output bit stream of the FIR filter. So here, output of FIR filter is equals to, let's call this as D equalizer of n. This is equals to convolution of D of n with respect to H equalizer of n. Okay, so this is something which you already know. I am not telling anything new here, right? So what you do is you basically just now split it. Let's say D of k into H of n minus k. So what you are seeing is that the output of a FIR filter is a weighted sum of the input bit stream, right? So you already know what D equalizer n will be look like. Okay, will be look like means that what is that? So if you say that the D n bit levels are like 1 0 or 1 minus 1. Okay, so now when you basically convolve with the FIR filter H of n, then this D equalizer, depending on the weights of Hn, will have different amplitudes. Okay, so just for an example, you say that if H of equalizer n is equals to something as, let's call it as A, and this as minus B, then you will see a different weighted sum of the Dn. So if you want to equalize on the transmitter side, we already know that what kind of signal do we want to what kind of bits we want to transmit. So now the question is that let's say you are given this D equalizer of n. So you want to transmit it. What is the best way to transmit? Okay, so let's say at the input of the output driver, you have D equalizer of n, which is an equalized response of the bit stream. So what do you think can replace this block output driver in between? Any idea? So I have to do nothing. I just need to apply the voltages depending on D equalizer. So you can say if D equalizer, if you are transmitting something as a voltage signal, if D equalizer is 1, I need to transmit 1 volt. If D equalizer is 0.5, I need to transmit 0.5 volt. So I just need to basically, like you can say, have a gain block in between the equalized bit stream and the output of the block. Okay. So if you think this is something which is just you can say either a buffer or an amplifier, any kind of thing, right? So I can use this block as a normal amplifier which has some gain with respect to the input bit, and the gain is linear. So this amplifier can very well work as an output driver, and this amplifier you can think of a simple current source amplifier that will also. For now, this will work with the details which we have. So, can you guess what are the problems with this amplifier? You need an amplifier which has a linear gain and very wide bandwidth. Right? So as the amplitude of the input bit stream changes, you need to change the output linearly. You cannot have like a gain of let's say 2 dB or 2 or 3 dB for a smaller amplitude and 1 dB for the other. If that thing happens, then you are like, you can say you are introducing more data dependent amplitudes, which is equivalent to introducing ISI. Okay. So the thing is, this amplifier means in principle a normal common source amplifier can work here, but in practice this cannot be done. And the reason is that you require a very linear gain and a very wide bandwidth. You can think about if you are transmitting a data rate at 10 Gbps, you require bandwidth more than 5 gigahertz, much more than that. And if you not only the bandwidth, at that time you require the linearity of the system also. And as the number of taps in the equalization will keep on increasing for the equalization, so then the thing is that there will be much variation in the amplitudes. And then when much variation in the amplitude comes, then you require that at all these amplitudes it should behave. So you can think of analogy in the other way, that if you are having only two inputs to the system, like +1 or -1, you can very well maintain the output of the system. Maybe it's a gain error. Let's say it's not basically 2 and -2, it's 1.9 or -1.9, a differential signal, right? That is easy to maintain. But if I say I'm having 1, 2, -1 and -2, then maintaining the same gain outside is difficult, and that too over a wide bandwidth. So this kind of amplifiers has not been used, but in theory it basically exists. And what is happening is, in the coming basically high data rates, they are again gaining some interest, because at high data rates the other topologies are not working. Okay, so we find that we cannot do this kind of output, we cannot pass basically this kind of transmit equalized bit stream. So what's the other way around? The other way around is that you look for the output driver and you change the output bit stream itself. Okay, what that means is, I think this is basic form of your feed forward equalization, that you use many different amplifiers which all are working and they are summed up. So this is basic, and this is you can say here you get something as d of n, this is d of n minus 1 and d of n plus 1. Like, you have different bit streams which are all coming to the different amplifiers, which are weighted by gain alpha, alpha minus 1 and alpha plus 1. So all these amplifiers are always seeing the same levels of the input. They are swinging, now depend how they are swinging, but they are always maintaining the same input amplitudes. That's very important in this basically output driver. And this you are transmitting across the channel. So implementing an equalization in the transmitter has to be done at the output driver. It's really difficult to basically do it any stage before, because if you do any stage before, it demands a linearity on all the following blocks till it basically is launched onto the channel. Okay, so now this basically now asks us to see what kind of output drivers we use in our serial links. Okay, so the one which you have seen already is CML output driver. Okay, so a basic CML output driver is, so you have d of n, d of n bar. Okay. What is happening? So you have d of n and d of n bar as an input. Oh, it's very small. Okay. Yeah, I need to get used to this part. Okay. So is the line thin or thick? Is it visible? Okay, and this is V bias, this is I naught. Okay, so this is Z naught, and you have this as, let me call this as VDD of transmitter. Okay, and this is VON, transmitter side, this is VOP and VON transmitter. Okay, so this output driver you have actually seen before, right? There's nothing new in it. So now, few things which you basically need to see, that in this output driver, the output impedance of the driver, what that means is that if I look here, the output impedance of the driver should be equal to the Z naught, right? And this is required because you want to terminate the channel with the channel characteristic impedance, right? So if in this particular implementation, you can say all these transistors are active devices and the resistor is a passive device. So once I choose that resistor as a some basically physical value or poly resistance, then in this particular case, the termination is taken care by your physical resistance, which is RT, right? And the signal swing will be taken care by the basically DN and DN bar. Okay. Then on the receiver side also the same thing needs to be done, that I need to terminate on the receiver side also with the same resistance RT. Okay. Now the thing is start. So if you look at in a DC operating state, okay, the I naught current is getting split between M1 and M2, right? And this basically your VOP TX is equals to VON. I means when I am saying in a common mode operating point, let's say when DN and DN bar both are at a same input, same basically common mode voltage. Okay, at that point, so let's call that as a VCM of transmitter, which is equals to V. And now this is again the assuming that VDD TX and VDD RX are same. Otherwise, they will also play a role. VDD minus I naught by 2, right, into RT by 4, RT by 2. This is like simple thing, right? Your I naught by 2 current is split in the 2, and I naught by 2 current flows to 2 resistance, which are RT and DC. So that is equals to I naught into RT by 4. Okay. Now, what happens is when you basically make the signals DN and DN bar like either 1 and high or low, which is, let's say DN is equals to 1, so DN bar is equals to 0. In this particular case, all the current will get steered into M1, right? And M2 there is 0 current. Now, so if there is all the current is steered into M1, so then VON of the transmitter is equals to VDD. So let's call VDD TX, if I assume here that VDD TX is equals to VDD RX is equals to VDD. So this is equals to VDD minus I naught into RT by 2. Right? Now what will be the voltage on VOPTX? VDD, right? So, and this is only the case when I am saying that VDD TX is equals to VDD RX. If that is not the case, then the VDD will be having a different value, means the output swing will be having a different value. But still the swing will be same actually. Swing means VOPTX minus VONRX is equals to I naught into RT by plus minus I naught into RT by 2. Okay, so this I can call is that, what is that? Right. Okay, so I hope, huh? What? No, this is VOPT at time it is only I naught into RT by 2. So that means if you take the sign into account, so at the other side, if I get your question right, so what you are saying is that the total swing will be I naught into RT? No, that will be the peak to peak differential swing will be I naught into RT. So you see, right, when basically M1 carries all the current flows through both RT on the transmitter side and RT on the receiver side. Right? So it will be I naught into RT by 2. And in the other branch, no current flows. So the amplitude which you are getting is like I naught into RT by 2. Now if you flip the sign, then the thing is you will get a, then VOPTX minus VONTX will be equal to minus I naught into RT by 2. So if I, so not at like, yeah, so if I say V out peak to peak differential, I think there is something happened. Just hold for a second. Okay. So let me just stop here and I will just, so, okay. So, sorry for the inconvenience. Okay. So V out peak to peak is equals to I naught into RT. This is what the swing which you look at the, what's the peak to peak differential output swing. Okay. Now, the things which you need to take care in this particular architecture is that I have assumed that VDD TX is equal to VDD RX, right? It's an assumption which I am making that the VDD on the two sides are the same, which is not easy to make, and so this will basically have its own effects. Okay. Then the other thing is, now you look for the DN and DN bar. I have very well used that DN is equals to 1 and DN bar is equals to 0. That means like I have applied the voltages which I have available with like high and ground, 1 and 0, right? And it may seem that it works here because all the current is steered to one side. But practically that is difficult, not difficult you can say, you can do it, but practically that degrades the performance. Okay, and the reason is this, think about it, that at a given common mode voltage, your M1 and M2, common mode voltage, let me just call it as, let's assume that this node is equals to Vx, right? So M1 and M2 both carry current I naught by 2 at a common mode voltage, basically, where you are having some VCM minus Vx is some potential minus Vt is equals to some overdrive, which is surely basically much lesser than 1. Okay. Now what you did is, because of the transient thing, what you did, you basically just applied a 1 volt on one side and a 0 on the other side. Right? So what happens is that if you apply a higher voltage on VCM, okay, when you apply, when M2, so in this particular case, when DN bar goes to 0, basically your M2 goes to subthreshold. Subthreshold means cutoff, actually here cutoff, not subthreshold. Okay, whereas DN equals to 1, M1 has to be maintained in saturation. If you cannot maintain M1 in saturation, the first effect what will happen is that the looking in impedance from the output driver will change, because your then GES will start playing the role if it gets into a triode region. That is the first thing. The other thing which happens is that if so the other thing which happens is that the Vx node potential will actually increase. Okay, because you are applying a high voltage, the current is the same, so the overdrive for whatever the current required is, only that will be maintained and Vx will switch. So any switching on the Vx node, what that will do is, any high speed switching, whatever the capacitor is basically located at this particular node, that capacitor will have a current. So let me just say ICP is equals to Cp dVx by dt. So this basically switching dynamic current will degrade the performance of the output driver. And in what sense it will degrade? So think that if you are having always constant 1, 1, 1, right? At that time no current is being switched. So the thing is, Vx is whatever potential it is sitting at the same potential. But if you, in place of that, if you are having an alternating data like 1, 0, 1, 0, then the Cp will be switching pretty fast. Means the current that will switch. So the output swing, you will see the difference. So the transitions, actually at the transitions you will see the difference, and that is called as a more or less as a data dependent ISI in the system. Okay, so your large Cp leads to your data dependent ISI. So you need to basically, and so it basically, so the Cp, you need to maintain Cp less, and maintaining a less Cp you can only maintain when your basically current source is of small length. Now a small Cp basically implies that but basically small Cp you can get it with the smaller length size for your current source for M0. Let's call this as M0. So you have a smaller M0, and if you have a smaller length for this current source, then you will have it will not behave as a good current source, because the whole system will have a lesser CMRR. The output resistance will be small. So there is a trade-off, how much Cp can you maintain. Okay. Then the other thing is, now look at that, basically when you are transmitting data Dn, just for example, so these are all ideal bits, right? With ideal signal which I have shown you. Okay, so before that, let me just say that we see if you are switching between all 1 and 0, all the bits, the Vx node will be switching much more, so that will degrade. So what we can do is, we can choose some lower switching voltage, let's call it VDD low, or not VDD low, this is not the VDD. So let's call this voltage as a local VDD, which can be different from the actual high VDD which you have in the system. And this is something as local ground, which is different from 0. So I will not basically switch always between 1 and 0, I will switch between some two levels such that all the current gets steered. Okay, now this will put a limitation on your previous block, because the previous block has to supply these kind of swings. Okay, so that we will see later, but before that, let's just look at these Dn and Dn bar signals. Okay, so the way I have shown is here is that they are having a not an infinite, but an instantaneous rise and fall, right? But normally that doesn't happen. You will always have a finite rise and fall time, which means if my Dn is changing something kind of this, at that time my Dn bar will change some kind. This is not what we. Okay. Oh no. So let me just do it. So if my Dn changes here, so let's say my Dn bar changes some kind of this. This is Dn signal and this is Dn bar signal. Okay. Now you see that there is a common voltage which I can, let's say, is the VCM input of the output driver, where both the transistors M1 and M2 are supposed to carry the same current. Okay. Now, how can you guarantee this kind of always a middle point in the system in a circuit which has to work at like all the time and process variations and all, right? So you can always have something, let's say, not something, you can say, let's say if something becomes like this. Coming clear? Okay. Where your crossing point is lower, and in one other case where you can have your crossing point which is higher. Now, which one do you think is basically the desired one? VCM in, let's call low, and this I can call, just say, VCM in high. Means the common meeting point is higher than the normal potential where they both carry the same current. So which one do you think is the preferable way of switching? Because guaranteeing a single point is much more difficult than guaranteeing basically a range above or lower. So let's see this thing. If you are having both of the switches lower, right? The extreme cases is that both are off. So what happens when both the M0 and M1 transistors are off? Speak a little bit louder, I can't hear. Huh? Yeah. So now if basically both of them are low, current source will go into linear region, or maybe if it is extreme case, it may go into a cutoff region. And then when both go high, so it has to come from the linear region to a saturation region. So that actually will introduce much more data dependent ISI in the system. Whereas if you are having both of them are basically higher than something, then the thing is when they both will try to carry more current, the normal thing is that your Vx potential will actually rise because the current is not more available there. So that particular function will basically, that also introduces a data dependent ISI in the system, but that is not as bad as the case when the current source actually goes to a cutoff region. So this actually, this kind of you can say operation demands that you have something in the circuit which basically always switches, which has like a common higher switching point than the normal threshold, right? So what you have now, so this is the, let's say if I just call this whole block as an output driver, your CML output driver. So sorry. So I have this as a CML output driver, which is basically across the channel, and now I need to have a block which gives swing like limited swing, VDD high and VDD low. Oh, I use, I think, local VDD and local ground, right? So that is like local. Oh, you have local VDD and local ground, which are different from your 0 and the main high supply. And then I also need something. So before going that, let's say this local VDD and local ground, you see that the swings are limited, right? So if the swings are limited, you cannot use a CMOS logic. Right? CMOS logic works between, like, you cannot use just an inverter or buffer to drive it. So use some kind of another CML logic. Okay. So this block is another, you can say, current mode logic or an amplifier. You can just say an amplifier with a loaded. And normally this is something like a CML, but this particular block does not need to be have a matched output impedance because it is driving a capacitive load, so it doesn't need to be, right? And this block is normally called as a pre-driver. Then you need something which basically switches at a higher, and you all know that the data which is coming from the serializer, they are all working on the CMOS logic because you want the high-speed data to go through and full swing. So you need something in between which is called as CMOS to CML converter. So all your bit streams has to go through this to realize one current mode logic's final output driver cell. Okay, and the thing is that, so if you see that the CML output driver that consumes some amount of current, whatever, let's say depending on the swing, you say this guy is consuming 10 milliamperes of current, right? 10 milliamperes of current means you have output swing of peak to peak differential output swing of basically how much? So yours is I naught into RT is equals to V out differential, right? So if this is I naught, so sorry. So you are having a half a volt peak to peak output differential swing. So I'm only getting a half a volt peak to peak output differential swing. I am burning 10 milliamperes of current here, and then I have a previous block. Now if you go and design any of these previous blocks, it turns out it consumes close to 30 to 40% of the power which you spend in the final output driver. And that is basically the reason that you have to drive the capacitance of the gate capacitance of the output driver. So this is normally 30 to 40%. The whole thing is important because when you are going to realize a CML output driver, the story doesn't end there. It's like it needs many more things to make it work. Okay. And now there is a CMOS to CML converter, which is a very general circuit for a CMOS to CML converter with a so in this particular case, you can say, let me just call this as VON, this particular node, and this node is VOP, right? So in this particular transition, you can see, okay, so this is, let's say your DN is equals to 1 and DN bar is equals to 0. So in this case, your VON is basically equals to 0 and VOP is equals to 1. In one condition, right? Now if you switch the signal, what will happen? When DN and DN10, which are coming from the previous block, which are actually having, you can say, full scale logic 0 to 1, crossing at 0.5 for now. So what will happen is that as soon as your DN makes a transition from 1 to 0, your top PMOS, which let's say call this as M1, this will come in action first. So the thing is, your VN actually goes from 0 to 1, right? So if you look that as soon as DN1 goes to 0, M1 gets switched on and it basically pulls the node high. Sorry. Whereas if you see that VOP going down, VOP can go down only when the bottom NMOS, let's call this as M6, I'm just naming them as M1, M2 and M3 to M6. So the thing is, your VOP will go down only when M6 turns on. So this actually delays the whole process. That is, that your VON node goes high. So let's say this is VON, and your VOP waits for some time to basically have something kind of this. It cannot go low below before the other thing comes in action. So this is the way to create a CML to CMOS logic with both of them basically having a higher than like a normal crossing point, in between crossing point. If you just want to have like some logic where you need a lower crossing point, you can just invert the PMOS to NMOS and it will have a lower crossing point. So those things are also being used. Okay. So now this whole, let me just put this, is like a one CML output driver which you need to, so this whole thing will come in like one single block. So do you have any questions till now? Yeah. Yeah. Data that's the data cleansing type. Very nice. So let me just say, okay, so the thing is that data which you are getting into the system, right? That is a random data. It is not like 1010 data. So consider a case when you are having a 4 consecutive ones, right? So in 4 consecutive ones, your input pair do not switch, right? So whatever you are getting is in response to the input bit is C, D, and you always get 1, 1, 1, means only the first transition is there. So let me just give you an example. So, okay. So let's say you're having these, there are 4, okay, let's say there are 4 consecutive bits, right? Whatever. Okay. So what do you think when this is the input to the output driver? Your VX node at the very first transition, in response to your input, you would have got something kind of this. This is as an output. I'm just basically because as soon as whenever you change, there will be some transition, right? So you get this thing. For the next bit, there is no transition happening actually. So you get all of them as one, right? Now, when this transition happens, I'm just basically showing you only for positive, let's say. Okay. Now think when this was the case and when again the transition happens, right? After some time, when things have not, let's settle again, right? So you will, now if you have a larger capacitor, then the transition edge for a different bit, like for a 0, 1 bit, will be different from the, when you are having, let's say 0, 0 bit, or 0, 0, like 3 zeros in the bit. So any intermediate node capacitance, you cannot like make it fully going to the steady state in this bit pattern. So let's put it this way. Huh? No, Vx will change. Vx will surely change. So if you basically work it, okay. So do you think that the Vx will not change at all because the signal is differential? Is that the thought? Yeah, that very much is a question. How much? Right. So if I say, means if I can say I am applying a 10 millivolt of input to the system, where the current is not getting steered, the Vx change is nominal. Okay. Whereas when I am steering the whole current from one side to the other side, right, then Vx will see a change. So this is no more working as a, you can say, small incremental circuits. These are all large swing signals, right? So when there is a large, so if you want to go in more detail for this, Okay, let me just ask this question. That if M1 and M2 both are working with a certain overdrive, let's call it VOB, carrying a current I0 by 2. Right? Now, if the, so the thing is, if you say that the Vx, if you switch the voltage on both M1 and M2, right? The current, when the current is switching from one to the other, at that time, the thing is the Vx node potential will see a change because these transistors are not behaving in a linear fashion. They are behaving that you are basically putting the whole current going from, so the current actually goes from I0 by 2 to I. So if I want to say if your transistor is working with an overdrive VOB, what should be the overdrive when you are working with when you basically have a current of I? Just on the square law model. That will be basically your V overdrive goes by root 2 if it's a square law. So you see a big change in the overdrive. And all your incremental logics which you basically apply, they are that the incremental change should be much lesser than the whole operating point. Okay. So if you want to derive, you can derive that what is the, if you apply a square law model actually on these M1 and M2 and you find how does the Vx change when the current is switching. So I agree with you that if the things were incremental, there is no change at Vx, but this is not an incremental picture. What was the second question? Yeah, so all these things when they are very, so okay, the other pictures which actually come, which are not shown here are all these capacitors. So as soon as you basically make the potential go low or high, so the thing is like this, your transistor gets cut off below a certain potential, right? If you just take an example, let's say your Vx is equals to operating point 0.2 volt, okay, your threshold voltage is 0.4 volt, so 0.2 volt Vx, threshold voltage 0.4 is basically 0.6, you have an overdrive of 0.2, just for example, overdrive of 0.2, so it's like basically sitting at 0.8, right? So in order to make this transistor M1 to go into a cutoff region, what will happen, you just apply, ideally you apply a minus V overdrive, so if basically Dn comes below 0.6, you are cut off. Okay, now what, so transistor doesn't conduct anything, but you are still applying a voltage. So the current, so this particular capacitor, so whatever the capacitor you are seeing at these nodes, let me just get it, yeah. So whatever this capacitor C1 which you are seeing, since you apply a voltage, that will lead to a change in Cp. So when the Cp node potential changes much below, it will have, so the thing is you are causing a more change at the node potential Vx. Now think what all the currents exist in the system. You have an I0 current, you have a Cp current as Cp dVx by dt. So all these currents at the Vx node should basic, so okay, let me do it this way. So let's say your M1 gets cut off, okay, and your Cp dVx by dt is one current, and your M2 carries a current, let's say Ix. Okay, so now your I0 plus your Cp dVx by dt should be equals to Ix, right? So earlier, if your dVx by dt were not there, you would get a swing which is basically equals to I0 times RT by 2 or something, like it's proportional. Now as soon as you have this dVx by dt at that particular node, then you are basically changing the current there. And a larger, and how will you get a larger dVx by dt? If basically from the input you are changing a much, like if Dn comes to 0, that will cause a more change in the voltage node Vx as compared to your basically input voltage comes only to 0.5. Does it get clear? Okay. Amplifier has to be linear and yeah. It's difficult to get a perfect amplifier working for variable amplitudes. Yeah. Equalizer, it can potentially take care of that, but the thing is, how much, at what effort? So the thing is, let me just say, if you are, surely there is a way to do it. The amplifier, you can spend more power in it, you can linearize it, like you use a resistive degenerated one, just for an example, to increase the linearity, right? But what is the penalty are you paying? So because of the penalty, that is, means you have some other block which works better than this, that's why it's not that used. But I'm saying that this is coming into focus because at some high data rates it's difficult to realize the other, like you have to linearize the gain. Means even this CML output buffer which I have shown you is not that good at high data rates. Very low voltage swing means, so you burn more current, you can get a large swing, right? Okay. So the thing, okay. So the question is this: do we need to have RT equals to 50 ohms? Right? Because you see, if I want a larger swing, I need to basically burn more power. But the thing is, can we do away with RT something as different from 50 ohm, maybe let's say 1K or something? And the answer to that question is no. Because all the kind of channels which you are using, whether for a legacy reasons or for basically some other reason, all these channels have a characteristic impedance of 50 ohms. If you do not have this impedance of 50 ohms, then you will see reflections, which will then degrade the performance. So the other thing is that it's not that you do not use output drivers which do not have a 50 ohm terminations. There are some kind of, like some particular application where you can use an output driver with non-50 ohm impedance. But for most of the backplane channels and others, you use a 50 ohm impedance because of the environment. So let me just give you for an example. Most of the on-chip links means you can say transmitter and receiver sitting on the same wafer but maybe somewhat apart, like a 10 millimeter apart. That is an on-chip link. You cannot get, so the thing is, there the correct, whatever channel you are realizing, right? For that channel is just a wire trace, nothing more than that there. There the impedance of the channel is not 50 ohms. And you do not even basically terminate with this, whatever the characteristic impedance you are seeing there. So you can use a different. But when you are operating in an environment where there are multiple lanes, right? So in that particular case, you need to use a 50 ohm impedance. Otherwise, reflections will create more problems. We will come to that, the differential resistance. So this is the common, so what you have seen is here, so differential has its own problems, I will tell you. So in this case, if you look right, each of these channels, my pen doesn't show here, oh, I need to figure out. So if you see that the channel 1, if I write, and channel 2, these are two independent traces. They can be on a microstrip or anything, right? Each of these channels are terminated with a 50 ohm impedance on either side. So this is mostly called as a single-ended termination you are having. Okay. Now, as you pointed out, there exists. So let me just. So what we have seen is in this particular case, you need to maintain that VDD-TX and the VDD-RX has to be equal, right? But then there exists a topology where you do not need to maintain, where so the thing is, you can basically have a differential termination. Are you talking about this? TX side differential termination. No, I didn't get that part. Yeah, so, okay. So the problem with an active current source in place of resistor, use a PMOS. That is, the thing is, so one thing is you can say you need to provide a 50 ohm termination. So you need a physical 50 ohm impedance. Okay. So, okay, let me just get your thing first. So let's say don't deal with this right now. So what you are suggesting is that in place of these resistors, what shall I do? I have a PMOS which carries all this current. Then what shall? Okay, so let's pick up differential resistance. So in this particular, now if this is a differential resistance, you see a differential termination, right? So if you are, so for all the common mode signals, you do not see this termination. For the common mode signals, you are not seeing a 50 ohm termination on each of these channels. Okay. The other thing is that the parasitic capacitance, which will come from these current sources, that will start basically playing a role. So I do not see that but this kind of topology is rarely used as such. You add a lot of this actually adds a lot of load at the output itself.